Oh.
You got one that's pretty rough today. Where do you get it?
Don't worry about helping me. It's all good. You just stand there, Alan.
I thought it was green.
It was green. Came up all right. Gave it a quick rinse. Polished up those competition alloys. Turned out to be genuine welds. How good's that?
Neat. But seriously though, what's with the green car?
That's just the parts car. That's coming soon. Don't worry. That'll
What do we
take
need
up
parts?
That'll take up space. What do you mean? This thing needs heaps of parts.
What for?
Lots.
Doesn't it have an Ecotech in it or something?
No, but we can put one in if you want.
Welcome back to the Skid Factory. This is our new project drag car. This is going to be a street registered road drivable race car, so we can do some cool events that are popping up everywhere now where you drag and drive. We really enjoy that with our mates, so we thought we'd get in on the game and try and do it ourselves. For those who aren't Australians, this is a VR Commodore, so it's a GM product. It's the sort of flagship rear-wheel drive platform for GM in Australia. It's actually a European, like Opel platform though, so there are similar cars over in Europe and possibly even the UK under Vauxhall that use this platform. They'll look a little bit different, and we use our own engines and transmissions in them as well. In the late 70s, GM Holden in Australia decided that due to stuff like fuel crisis and stuff like that, that they wanted to go to a smaller vehicle than what was then the sort of HQ to WB sort of range. So what the Iron Lion Kingswood is, they were the sort of flagship rear-wheel drive model back then. Well, everything was probably rear-wheel drive back then, but they were the big car. So in the late 70s, I think late 78, 79 sort of model, they had the VB Commodore, which was the first of the Opel-based cars. Again, they were fitted with Holden Australia engines, so small six-cylinder red motors, really sort of 1960s based stuff, plus Holden V8s, which were late 60s design. Later on, they actually put a four-cylinder engine in them, which was the most horrific engine ever made. It's basically the six-cylinder engine with two cylinders cut off. It was awful, could barely do 100 k's an hour in most cases. So eventually we got into just model changes. The engines got slowly probably worse because of emission control and that sort of thing in the 80s. We got into the VKs like Dave's twin turbo one. In 85, we went to unleaded fuel, which was 10 years later than the rest of the world by US or European standards and Japanese standards even. So that was when the VL came out, which is still just a facelift, even though it looks a fair bit different to the eye because of the new front end and that sort of thing. And that's when they put the Nissan RB30 engine in them, because they didn't have an engine that was good enough for unleaded fuel, because the engine was the 60s based design, so it couldn't handle not having the lead. It was just too much of an old design. So we got that VL with the RB30 in it, which was a pretty big revelation. I did talk about this way back in the VL series years ago, 3 years ago I think it might have been, how that sort of changed the local market standard because that engine was so good for its time. Eventually that engine became too expensive, and then when they changed over to the VN model, which looks completely different to a VL, but it's actually still based on the same platform. There's a lot of stuff underneath it. It's exactly the same. They've just done a body sort of change and modernised it. They went over to Buick-based engines. They actually did import the engines straight from the States initially. So it was a front-wheel drive engine. They turned them around and added some pipes and stuff to make it work in rear-wheel drive form. By the time we got to this model, this is a VR, came out in late 93. It's kind of like a bit of an evolution, as always, of the older model. It has got like front suspension actually was heavily changed by that stage. It still ran the Buick V6 or Holden V8, but by that time it had an electronic 4L60E instead of a hydraulic Turbo 700 auto. I think they started dabbling in Getrag manual transmissions for the manuals, which obviously there wasn't that many manuals around, but they sort of started messing around with hybrids of different sources rather than just GM source stuff. When they facelifted this VR model to the VS, which is the other mould covered thing we've got outside, they changed to what they call an Ecotech V6, which is basically just a slight modernisation, change of inlet manifold and that sort of thing, and it was purely to appease the emissions control. The fact that they had this 60s design Buick V6 pushrod all cast iron engine that could actually comply with emissions at that time was pretty amazing. But to be fair, that old, what we call them mang motors, because they make horrible noises when you're banging them off the rev limiter. They were probably the most reliable and long-lasting engine that they ever put in Commodores. They just worked. They didn't have many problems at all, especially by this age. So they were actually quite a good thing. And they did continue them on right through to about 2004 in various, it was probably still an Ecotech by then. Then they changed to a modern V6, which was an absolute train wreck. So there might be a lesson in that for us. This particular car has got a lot of history. You can probably tell by the look of it that it's been around the block a few times. We bought it off Nugget Garage, so Scott and Chris, they had it as a sort of budget race project. They put a Buick V6 back in it and China turbos and that sort of thing. I think it had a Nissan automatic transmission, which actually came out of my 300ZX on the back of it. So it was a bit of a hybrid. And they actually, as they do, they made it fast, of course. I think it ran in the 10s. But prior to them buying it as a roller, it was actually, I don't think it might not even been a roller. I don't think it had anything in it because it had been stripped out from its previous life. So prior to them having it, it had a long history of racing, and it was an 8-second car way back. We actually found the name of the original owner and got in contact with him, and he's filled us in on a lot of details about the history of the car. So Woody's going to give you a rundown.
When the car was 5 years old, a bloke named Rodney purchased it and he converted it to a 1JZ GTE and an R154. Rodney's PB with that combo, I think, was a 10.2 with 100 shot of nitrous, but over the years ended up finding the limit of the R154 manual and the Borg-Warner diff, so changed it over to a Power Glide and a 9-inch combo. Again, kept on racing. A cage ended up going in the car. I believe the PB for the car was an 832 at 170. He held a record for 5 years for the 1JZ record. I think maybe Goalie took him out in the end for that, but you know, he's done jamborees, he's done plenty of race events, and eventually, after Jamboree in 2017, did an 840 at 170 mile an hour. They retired the car. Don't know if the Hoff bought it off Rodney or maybe there was another owner in between. Is that right, Alan? Yeah? Yep.
No, the Hoff bought it off Rod when he...
So the Hoff then bought it off Rodney, and then Ethel and Hoff, the idea for the car was, from what I could figure out, they wanted to kind of use it as the rolling car that they can swap engines in and out of in different combinations. So that's when a Buick V6 went in. Ethel told us that he wanted to do like a Barra swap and then wanted to do like a Turbo LS and then maybe 2JZ, like keep changing engines, but I don't know what, it's kind of like kicked the bucket and sold the car on, and that's when we stepped in and put our hands up and said, yeah, we'll take it. So as I said, it was a street car, so this has modifications plates for the roll cage and everything already. So having a mod plate for a roll cage in a car these days is a bit hard to come by, a bit like Lee's Tirana that was mod plated for the old 304. You can't get a car registered like that anymore. So we're going to convert this from a drag car back to a street car. And Alan's going to let you know the plans. Or we're going to let you know, we're going to do a plan thing, or we're going to do some comments guessing. Back to a Buick V6. So as you can see, there's plenty of room in that engine bay there for a conversion. Maybe something like a big block. Maybe turbo LS.
Been done.
Case swap. I've got one of them in the corner. SR20 maybe. Didn't like them. No.
Actually, we're going to not reinvent the wheel and spend 6 months on a car this time. We're actually just going to return this back to how it was originally built back in the 2000s, except we are going to go from 1J to 2J. So 2JZ Power Glide 9-inch, specifically set up to try and, I guess our goal is to
Well, the cage is 8.0,
to run
isn't
an
it?
8.0 or something like that, but the reality of it is we've got no experience in drag racing at all. You know, like we've been out to strip a couple of times, but nothing in a real drag car. So the adventure for us is going to be learning how to operate a high-powered race car, which people think drag racing is easy, but that's because they've never done it.
It's not an easy sport. I'd like to point out too that we're not going to just go straight to an 8-second pass. We'll probably be doing like some 12s and 13s or something straight off the bat. We probably can't even go that slow.
I don't think it would go that slow.
So 2JZ, there's only one person to call when it comes to JZ stuff for us, and that is our man Golby, which we've already built the engine. We originally got that engine off Dave, our mate, years ago for the Alanomics circle.
Whole saw Dave.
Stay tuned for next week. Next episode is the engine build. We're going to hook in. We've got a bunch of awesome parts for that thing.
I thought you didn't have to build a 2JZ. They just made 2,000 horsepower.
We've made that joke plenty of times. No, you can't make 1,000
that's right.
horsepower.
It is a joke.
Well, Rodney did that with a 1JZ, but how many engines did he blow up?
Lots.
So stay tuned. We've got everything organised for this car. We've been organising it for a long time now. So engine, gearbox, the diff hasn't been done yet, but we're all over it. And then fingers crossed we can kind of throw everything together and it won't take us, as Al said,
We just got to try and keep ourselves under control and not rebuild the entire car. Just do what needs to be done.
We had an
And
argument
by that I mean Woody needs to keep himself under control.
Righto, so stay tuned for some punch-ons and arguments about keeping bonnet pins and not, or a blower motor.
Having a fan.
And we'll be back next week with some more Kevin action. I still want to call it Karen, actually, or another name.
I thought you wanted to call it Wendy.
Wendy, yeah, perfect.
No, it's Kevin.
Comment below what we should rename the car.
Or whether we should rename it.
Thanks for watching, homies. See you next time. Cheers. Jeez, and most of these still run, am I correct, or what's the go?
Yeah, mate. Running when parked.
Running when parked. So we're gonna get... How long has this thing been sitting here for, dude?
Years.
Look at that, that's some good...
You could probably age the mould.
Age the mould, get some layers on there. Yeah, what are you tying onto there? We need some bits off this thing.
No, mate, straight off there. That's fine.
Straight off the fuel tank strap.
That's where the last bloke did it.
So I got to give a mad shout out to Billy for loaning the trailer. Thanks, legend.
Yeah, right, mate.
Solid trailer for his professional drifting career. Just got to pump up some tyres and we'll smash the trade plate on and it's good to go. Look at this. Absolute jam. I was very worried about a snake popping out just then. Ugh, this is really bad, eh? Stinking. Anybody want a VS bumper bar? Oh, some Chewy. Score. How much for the Civic over here, mate?
Civics are expensive.
Little case swap. Is this thing turbo, this Mazda?
Yeah, man.
It is.
Yeah. Did this one run when parked?
This did run when parked. This would run. They're all gonna run, man.
2.2. Nice. Auction day.